Hello, this is Harvey Ambrose. I'm preaching this message on behalf of the Missionary Baptist Voice of Africa radio program broadcast out of Monrovia, Liberia. And continuing our study of the book of Genesis, we are in chapter 34. Genesis 34. And I'll begin the reading in verse 1. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her, and lay with her, and defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. And Shechem spoke unto his father Hamor, saying, Give me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved. And they were very wroth, because he hath wrought folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. And Hamor communed with them, saying, The soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you give her him to wife, and make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade therein, and get you possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father, and unto her brethren, Let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me, I will give. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled their daughter, or Dinah their sister. And they said unto them, We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent unto you, if you will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised, then we will give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters unto us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then will we take our daughter, and we will be gone. And I'll end the reading there and try to speak about this. It's not a very easy thing to preach about, not a very good, easy thing to teach about, for a couple of reasons. One, and I guess foremost, I am not fully persuaded in my own mind of what the meaning of this is. The words are rendered in the King James Bible into English, in which it would sound almost as though the Canaanites, specifically Shechem, the son of Hamor, and together with his father Hamor, had not committed a particularly bad offense in the defilement of one of Jacob's only daughter. It doesn't sound like it's all that bad. It talks about he loved her. Let's see if I can find where it said this. It says he loved the damsel. His soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. And he loved the damsel, and he spake kindly unto the damsel. Many of you, even myself, damsel is not a word that we use when we speak of young people. So we're not positive if that translation into an archaic English has sufficient meaning to us as to how old Dinah was. We don't know for sure how old Shechem was. We don't know the particulars of what happened. So, I have been of two minds about it. One mind is that Dinah was out and about. It says what her reasons were. She went out to see the daughters of the land, meaning the daughters of the Canaanites that lived there in that city, which, if I back up to the previous chapter, we'll remember that, Jacob and Esau had been reconciled to each other, loved each other, went their separate ways, with Jacob promising to come to Esau later after his family has made its way slowly into the land. And that they did travel into the land. They went into a town called Succoth and built a house, and he made booths or stalls for his cattle, and he called the place Succoth. And then he went further, it says, to Shalem, a city, and Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. So when he got there, it says he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money, and erected there an altar. So, backing up a little bit into the previous chapter, we are to note that even though God had promised all the land of Canaan to Abraham, and then again to Isaac, and then a third time to Jacob, and it's not as though God would ever go back on a promise, but it's better to hear the promises of God firsthand, yourself. Hear them from Him to you. And that is done in our spirits. We hear the voice, in the Bible, in the New Testament, in the Gospel according to John, Jesus often talks about the Son of Man speaking of Himself. But when He's talking about something specific to His divinity rather than His humanity, He will say the Son of God. So when He's talking about a person getting saved or being brought from a state of death into a state of life, He says, the day is coming and now is when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live. Well, He's saying it's not talking about His human voice. It's not the physical Jesus that speaks to people today and causes them to pass from a state of death in sin to a state of life in the righteousness given them by God. It's a spiritual communication on the spirit level between the Spirit of God and our own spirit. It's true communication, and it's doubtless when it happens to you where it came from, and I'm digressing some, but how we speak about things is kind of important to understand. But here we have Jacob, the third recipient of a promise of the land of Canaan going to he and his posterity, and yet he bought a field. He bought a field from a prince of the nearby town where they came, Shalem, a city of Shechem, a region, from the prince of that region, whose name was also Shechem, and whose father would be the chieftain of that band of Canaanites living there at the time, for 100 pieces of money. And why do I want to talk about that? Well, I don't, not for very long. But I'm going to mention this. People today, to this day, say that the Jewish people, ethnic, never had a claim on that land. Never had any right to it. To which everybody will object, well, God gave it to them. Well, even though God gave it to them, we read here where they bought it. They at least bought part of it. We know Abraham bought a grave, a cave where he and his family could be buried. That's all he wanted. That's all he felt he needed. Jacob wanted more, and I'm not saying that's a problem, and he paid more, and he bought some land because he had a big family. So he did that. And so it was a conveyance by normal standards, used to this very day, whereby someone pays and someone else receives a piece of property. So they did buy the land. And God also saw to it that they got it. Now, the people today that make claim on it, I can't speak to what their claim is. I don't know. It may be that God wants them to have it again. It may not be that. The Bible's unclear on that, at least in my eyes. Then getting back to chapter 34. So now, they're in this place. They are in the area that is under the rule of, let's see, what was his name? Hamor. And also his son, the prince, Shechem. And this girl, we don't know for sure her age, but she apparently goes out to meet the daughters of the neighborhood. She's going out amongst the town and the country there to see people her own age, to see girls. I mean, she is one daughter amongst 11 brethren at this time. So she has 11 brothers, but she's the only daughter of Jacob. She wants to have someone of her own sex to play with if she's really young, or to talk to and be friends with if she's older. I tend to think that she's not older. The word here, damsel, seems to indicate a fairly tender age. Somewhere probably between 11 and say 14. Not marrying age, certainly not by the standards of where I live. In fact, of such an age to where if someone were to take by force, if a man were to take by force a girl of 11 or 12, even 14 years old, even if he had her consent to a sexual relationship, that is statutory rape in most of the states of the United States of America. I don't know what your laws are there. But in any case, the language here used in verse 2 of chapter 34 kind of precludes any agreement on her part, because it says that Shechem, the son of Hamor, prince of the country, saw, so his eyes looked at her, and when he saw her and liked what he saw, he took her, and what that means is he abducted her. Now we may, if we're not careful, and I used to not be as careful in my reading of this, we may think that means he just took her to bed, but no, he actually took her, because throughout chapter 34, she is in the possession of and living in the tent of these Hivites, in the tent of Shechem. He took her and kept her. He kidnapped her, is what that really means. She was not rescued until her brothers came and slew the men of that city and retrieved her from being a hostage or a captive there. So that he saw her and took her, that's beginning to show right there that this was not a thing agreed upon by Dinah. In fact, given how clear the Bible is on most things, if Dinah had been guilty of desiring the self-same thing, a sexual encounter with this man, the Bible probably would have noted that. But it did not note any such thing. So this is why my thinking is going to lead me to discuss this the way I see it today, and maybe not the way that I saw it years ago. I think that Hamar lusted after her as soon as he saw her, that he became obsessed with her. In these later verses, it talks about he loved her. His soul clave to her, and he loved the damsel. Again, damsel meaning a very young girl, perhaps 11 years old, as early as that. Well, that's pedophilia. That is having sex with a minor, with someone who is not old enough to know what they want or what they ought to do. They may have been instructed, but the instruction doesn't reach. They're not really fit because of their youth to make decisions of great consequence, which this certainly is. Now, a lot of people in this country take sexual encounters with people not their spouse very lightly. They commit fornication even before they're married. They act as though there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Even after they're married, they commit adulterous relationships with other married and unmarried people. And they seem to think that's kind of okay too. But I will tell you that God calls it a sin. Both of them, fornication and adultery. They're both sinful. He also says that it's a sin against a person's own body. You know, when you commit that sin, it's a sin against your own body. And I used to wonder what that meant, and I'm not sure I know now, but I will say this. If you think that you can have sex with someone that is not your spouse, you're not married to them, and that there is no consequence to that, particularly if there's no pregnancy that comes from it, or even no disease that comes from it. And both those things are certainly possible and happen all the time. They think, well, if those things don't happen, then it's okay. Nobody knows. It's no big deal. That's not true. That encounter always is on the mind of the person engaged in it. And they live with that for the rest of their lives. They may later come upon someone they love and marry that person. And yet they may wonder, all the time, well, should I have told them about these other encounters that I've had? And they become ashamed of what they've done in having unlawful sexual relationships with people before marriage or after marriage. In any case, it is against your own self-interest, it says against your body or against yourself that you committed the sin of adultery or fornication. God says, be sure that your sins will find you out. Well, these are sins that, should you ever be saved, maybe you've done it 100 times. There are some of you listening that may have done that many, many times and thought not a thing about it. You may later on get saved. The Lord may have mercy on you. He may save you, and you'll think different about that after you're saved. And you'll wish you'd never done it. But there's nothing you can do. You can't undo a thing that's done. Anyway, I believe that this young man, and I call him young, he very well could be, 18 years or older, an adult by our standards. He saw it, he took it. He lay with her, means had sexual relations with her, and it says, and defiled her. The term defiled certainly brings about a connotation, and particularly in the Hebrew word that defiled is translated from, that it was not it was in no way appropriate, and it was violent. It was an assault upon this very young girl. Now, to me, there is no excuse for that whatsoever. And in fact, men who would rape a tender-aged girl, if they ever have, I don't know how to call it, the liberty to proceed with such a thing, if they desire it in the first place, particularly if they act upon it, ever, chances are great they'll do it over and over and over. It's just statistically speaking, pedophiles, or pedophiles as the Brits would say, they really don't cure for the most part. Probably the best thing to be done with them is to have laws on the books whereby they're put to death, because we don't need them. Society does not need people who would rape and kidnap underage children. And yet it is becoming more and more common in this country. It may be so in your countries there in West Africa. It's deplorable. There are people that will buy and sell children for sexual purposes or worse, to murder or to torture. I mean, anyone that has within themselves a desire to hurt a young child, sexually or otherwise, that's someone who most likely is possessed of a devil. A devil that has those desires has taken control of the mind and heart of the person who has those desires, and is probably unlikely to leave. I don't know, I'm saying things I don't know about for sure. I know one thing, I've been a very wicked person before I was saved. I haven't been perfect since I was saved, but I never, ever, ever considered raping a woman. I've certainly never thought about having sexual relations with a child. I don't understand that. I'm just being as brutally honest as I can, and maybe some of you hearing this have done that. Now, the Bible teaches us, Jesus himself said that all manner of sin is forgivable. It says it is forgiven. It's forgiven to those whom Jesus saves. I won't argue that. If Jesus said that's true, that's true. And I don't know, but what sins that I have done in God's eyes are even worse than these things. I don't know. But I just say it's a different order of person than I am, and I don't understand it. I can't wrap my mind around it. I can't emotionally place myself where this man was. So I'm not getting very far in this chapter, but I want you to understand that this is not just some ancient thing that happened 4,000 years ago. This is here and now. This is in our culture. What that girl experienced, what Dinah experienced because of her indiscretion. I'm not saying she was sexually indiscreet. She just left her home, which was safe, and she went out into the country looking to find friends, girlfriends, friends of her age and her gender to play with or to become acquainted with, thinking that the world is as safe as her home. The world is not safe. It's particularly not safe for children that cannot defend themselves. It is also particularly not safe for women and girls who are too weak to protect themselves against men, and who sometimes don't have a mature judgment concerning what's on the minds of men with respect to women. They somehow think that they can reform men. It's a pretty rare man that lets a woman reform him. That's probably a foolish notion that many women have. And to think that there's not people out there that are looking for people like that. He saw her, and then he acted upon what he saw. And the Hebrew words here where it says his soul clave unto her, and he loved her, and spake kindly. Well, I'll stop this spake kindly. His soul clave to her. He loved her. Yeah, but when you look at the Hebrew, at those words translated, what it really means is he was absolutely obsessed with her. There's no word there that is like what we think of as love and kindly affections. If he had been kindly affected towards her, he would not have defiled her. He would not have raped her. He would not have abducted her forcibly. His intentions towards her were not good, even when he says he wants her to be his wife. That just means, back then a wife fell totally under the law of her husband. If he said do this, she had to do it. And he could do anything he wanted to her. And pedophiles want to do a lot of things to young children. I guess until they're not young anymore, and they just discard them. I don't know. It's a really hard chapter to talk about. I'd rather talk about Jesus, folks. I would rather do it. But here it is in our text, and we need to learn from it. We need to learn to be careful, that the world is dangerous. We need to be on our guard against people that would do bad things, which could affect us for life. Dinah, the rest of her life, never was able to forgive. I don't know her, but I guarantee you I know human nature well enough to know that she never forgot the assault that happened upon her 4,000 years ago. Now it says in heaven, he'll wipe all tears from our eyes. I hope she's there, and somehow God has taken that grief from her. I don't know how he does it, but I believe he does. But in this world, it was a vexation of spirit and a burden that she carried with her, doubtless, to her grave. Now, I've not gotten very far at this. I'm going to try to just summarize it and go through it. But Jacob heard about it. He didn't say anything until his sons came in out of the field where they were with the cattle. And then Shechem, the perpetrator of this crime, his father Hamor comes to Jacob and he wants to talk. And basically he says, you know what, he doesn't say it's a bad thing. Everybody knows it's a bad thing that happened. And the absence of Jacob's daughter is proof that it's still a bad thing because she has not been restored to her family. She's held captive. It doesn't talk about that so much here, but when you read it carefully, that's exactly where she was. She was in the tents of Shechem. But he says, my son he's just obsessed with your daughter, and that's just, this is Harvey's paraphrase. He just really wants her. And he's done this thing, but we can make this right. There's some way we can make this right. We will, why don't you give her to him as a wife? And then husband and wife, that'll be okay. To which Jacob doesn't answer. And then when Hamor, the father, is done talking, and no one has moved to say, yeah, we'll give her as a wife, rather than Jacob speaking up, his sons, so the brothers of Dinah, they begin to speak. And when Hamor's done talking, then his son, the villain, if you were, Shechem, begins to speak. Because no one said, yeah, you can have her. He starts saying, name your price. Just any price. I don't care what it was. You name your price and I'll give it to you. In fact, you can give us all your daughters and we'll give you our daughters and you can live here in this land with us. Our land will be your land. Our home will be your home. In fact, it says we will be one people. If I remember that right. Let me see if I can find it. But basically, that's what it boils down to. He says it in one place. Now, but see, that's against what God had said. It's against what prophets have seen. In the future, they see this very people descended from Jacob called Israel, and the prophet Balaam is called, and he has a prophecy, and it says concerning this people, and in Numbers 23, it says, from the top of the rocks I see him, talking about the nation of Israel, and from the hills I behold him, and lo, the people shall dwell alone, and shall not be reckoned among the nations. They're separate. Now some can say he was seeing physical Israel, and surely they were before him physically. But that's really also talking about the Israel of God, the people of God, the people who have been saved by God and given eternal life by God. We truly are alone. There's nobody else like us in the whole world. We were like the rest of the world, but then God took us from that state of death, which is natural life in this world, and headed towards a permanent death in the future, and given us eternal life. And that is separated. He's given us a righteousness, not our own, but his righteousness as a gift, and we're not reckoned amongst the nations. We were amongst the nations. The kingdoms of this world, we read, have become the kingdom of our God and of his Christ. We are separated by God, not because we're good, but because he saved us. And Israel is indeed a separate, but we are not to be conformed to this world, is what the Bible teaches. Don't be like it. Don't like it. In fact, he says, set not your affection on the things of this world. Don't even like the things that the world has to offer, but set your affections, the desire of your heart, upon those things which are above. But anyway, getting back to this, that's what he proposes. We'll all be one big happy family. We'll share our children. We'll share our possessions. Well, finally, the Israeli side, if you will, begins to speak. The sons of Jacob say something. They say, and it says they said it deceitfully. Okay, so they're saying something, but they don't really mean it. That's what this text says. In verse 13, the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully and said, because he had defiled Dinah their sister, they said unto him, we cannot do this. We can't give her to you, and we can't share our children and your children together because your males have not been circumcised. And that's a reproach to us. We can't live with that because you've not been physically, your men have not been physically circumcised. And we know that God set that as a covenant between Abraham and his descendants, and throughout the years. And so they're saying, if you want to go get circumcised, then we can do this. Then we will give our daughters unto you, and we'll take your daughters unto us, and we'll deal with you, and we'll be the one people that you want us to be. We'll be one big happy family, we'd say here in America. But if you won't, if you won't be circumcised, well, then we'll just take Dinah and go. Well, Shechem is so obsessed with having Dinah, this underage girl, that he says, sure, why not? Go ahead and cut it off. I don't care. And talking about the foreskin. And he goes to the men of his town, and he says, he makes this report to them. He says, the men, they're peaceable with us. In other words, they're not looking for a fight. Therefore, let them dwell in the land, and they can trade there. For the land, behold, it's large enough for them and for us to take their daughters and to us for wives, and let us give unto them our daughters. Only herein will the men, only if we do this, will the men consent to be with us, to be one people, if every male amongst us is circumcised, just like they're circumcised. And then he mentions this: shall not their cattle, talking about Israel's cattle, shall not Israel's cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with them. In other words, they're saying, not only do we get to marry their children, but we get to take all their possessions. See, that's really an interesting thing too. It just kind of comes up. But it's important because eventually the tables are turned, and all of the possessions of these Hivites are taken from them and become the possessions of Israel. So in other words, he's convinced them to do it. Okay, and I didn't even read that far in the reading, but I'm still just going to go through the story because I want to finish it in one lesson if I can, because it's an unpleasant topic. So he convinces the men of that city to be circumcised. And so they all go out, they get circumcised. And then in verse 25 we read that, and it came to pass on the third day, so 3 days after they were circumcised, when they were sore from the operation, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren. Now all of the sons of Jacob are her brothers, but most of them are half brothers. These two are full brothers with Dinah. So Simon and Levi took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly. They were convinced that they were in the right. And I don't know where they got that unless the Lord somehow or other encouraged it. Because I know one thing, the Lord was totally against them becoming one people. He did not want them to be one with these people. And that's what was on the table. That was the proposal given by these Hivites, the people of Hamor, the leader Hamor. It says they came boldly and slew all the males. So all these males, they were sore from having been circumcised 3 days ago, and then two armed men came in and they slew Hamor. That's the chief guy, the chief, the tribal chief or city chief, and then the prince, Shechem his son, with the edge of a sword. They took Dinah out of Shechem's house. See, she had been abducted and was in the house of the man who had abducted and raped her. She had never been given back to her family. That's one of the reasons I think it's important that we understand that this was not her fault. I've even read commentators and thought about it and almost went that way, that thought it was partly her fault. Maybe she didn't dress right. Maybe she didn't talk right. Maybe she said she was going to look at daughter. But see, it doesn't say any of that. It just says she went out to see the daughters. But then a man saw her and took her and raped her, abducted her, kidnapped her, held her, and would only release her under certain circumstances. In fact, he didn't want to release her at all. He'd buy her to make the peace, but he wasn't going to let go of her. So anyway, they took her out of the tent where she had been held. And it says, and the sons of Jacob, and I think that means then all of the sons, came upon the slain, and they spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. And they took the sheep and the oxen and the asses, and that which was in the cities, so all the possessions, and that which was in the fields, so what's out in the country, all their wealth, all their little ones, all their wives, took they captive, and they spoiled even all that was in the house. So these boys, they got vengeance. And I don't know, it doesn't ever say it was wrong. Now Jacob has something to say about it. It says, and Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, ye have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. So he's saying, the action that you took is going to put us, to make us enemies with all these tribes, which are no doubt related to these Hivites that you have slaughtered. And he's saying, you know, this may not have been the best choice from a purely human standpoint. That's all he's saying. He doesn't say that God would have prohibited it. He did not say that you have sinned against God. He didn't say that you did anything wrong. He just said, what you've done is going to bring trouble upon us because we're very few in number, and this land is full of people that you have made to become an enemy to us because they're not going to like what you did. Well, you know, if the Bible says, if God be for us, who can be against us? I don't think it's wrong to put to death pedophiles. I don't think it's wrong. I mean, it's wrong for us to take, you know, the law of our country is such that we can't violate the law. But I think that the Bible would teach us that rape, that type of thing, that's worthy of death. Adultery is worthy of death. The law of God says that all such people should be put to death. Well, all these boys did was put them to death. And so anyway, they did it. Jacob noted that it's going to cause them trouble. Well, it did. And yet that had been prophesied. God had told Abraham, Jacob's grandfather, that they were going to dwell in a land that they didn't own for a long time. For 430 years, they were going to be, well, at the time of the saying, it'd be 400 years. They would they would be dwelling in a land not their own. They'd be persecuted. They'd eventually be enslaved. People say, well, that means they were in Egypt 400 years, but that's not what it says. They just said they'd be in a land not their own. Well, they were persecuted right here by the Canaanites. Dinah was raped by one of the Canaanites in a land that they didn't possess at the time. And they were troubled by these people, and they always were. And then they finally came back out of slavery in Egypt, and God gave them the land in its entirety. So don't get confused about the 400 years. They weren't slaves for 400 years. It was more like 144. But they were always strangers and pilgrims in a land not their own until they came back from Egyptian slavery. Well, the brethren of this girl answered the father, who said, well, we're going to have trouble. They said, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? In other words, we couldn't just let that stand. What he did was awful. He did an awful thing, and he paid an awful price. And I think it's probably good for the girl that she sees that this injustice done to her was paid for in blood. That the wrong that she did, or that was done to her, was just flat out wrong and should be avenged. Now, we should take vengeance upon ourselves like these boys did. God says, vengeance is mine. But perhaps he was the one that put it in their hearts to slay those people. I don't know. I know that he started the trouble. And I know that the brothers of this girl, they finished it. So we should all be circumspect in what we do. Be understanding that the world is not altogether safe all the time. That the things that we do will eventually find us out. So don't do bad things. And also be aware that there's evil out there that could catch us up. So be very cautious as you live in the world. I'll end it with that. Such as it is. Good night.